in welcoming Your Excellency, Mr. President, ably represented as Vice President, and other participants to this very important conference initiated by the National Assembly in collaboration with the Presidential Advisory Committee on the Fight Against Corruption. For more than 40 years now, the anti-corruption fight has remained a major policy thrust of a lot of successive administration. While this is true, it is also unfortunately true that not much traction has been achieved in preventing corruption in our public space. It is safe to say that we have failed before for various reasons. Whatever these reasons are, we cannot afford to fail this time again. This time we must get it right. To lose this opportunity will have unfold impact on our history and on our development. In the past, we have seen military governments cite rampant corruption as a rationale for assuming or holding on to power. We have also witnessed firsthand how past democratic governments have sought to eradicate corruption without much success. In order to succeed this time, we cannot afford to make the fight against corruption simply a matter. We cannot also afford to make it a chase in the dark. It must be rooted in effective strategy, demonstrable plan with various layers. As a nation, we still have a long way to go on the fight against corruption. Having tried to solve the problem through spontaneous institutional action, I hereby propose that it is time to adopt a more organized and structural-oriented intervention strategy set up with concrete solutions for different strands of the corruption matrix. We must ask ourselves, what have other nations who have been successful against corruption around the world done? What do we do to differently change our current outcomes? What is clear is that whatever strategy is adopted that does not include certain priorities is likely not to lead to a sustainable fight against corruption. And what are these priorities? One, political will. Transparency in government processes and procurements, reduction in bureaucratic bottlenecks, education, technology adaptation and enforcement of sensible rules and reduction of discretions, neutral application of sanctions, capacity building, and oversight and monitoring. All this would tantamount to factors that are necessary to achieve success. What this means is that the challenge is one that cannot be just the executive alone. Neither is the fight against corruption just one of agencies alone, such as EFCC, ICPC, or other enforcement agencies. It is our collective responsibility. And that is why I commend the collaboration this morning of the legislative arm of government and the Presidential Committee in coming together to organize the seminar. It is a step forward in part of the collective responsibility. Over the past year and a half, with the leadership provided by Mr. President, which must be truly commendable, because for once we are showing the political will that is necessary to take this vicious cycle of corruption out. Because in my view, without the political will, the chances of any success in corruption is limited. Taking a cue from this, we at the 8th National Assembly have also addressed one of the key areas, which is oversight and intervening at all times. The oversight means a review of the activities of management, administration of ministries, departments, and agencies of federal government, and to ensure that reports related to any of these oversights are reports that are not buried but are brought to conclusion with dispatch. For instance, recently, legislative supervision in areas of, for example, the operationalization of the Treasury Single Act regime, the NAITI report that for years has never been read on the floor of the National Assembly. And this is a report that year in, year out uncovers over $600 million on an annual basis of areas of leakages in our nation. And presently, some of the other areas that we're looking into. The fight against corruption must be driven by a well-articulated and deliver strategy, one that is robust, it is multifaceted and driven by leadership across all aspects of our political and social systems. It cannot be a fight of one man, but rather that the vigilance of every one of us in our various spheres of influence. Let me share some personal experiences that shed light to some of the strategies. I remember in the 7th Assembly, where I led the areas on the exposure on the corrupt fuel subsidy management. This was a fraud of over 5 trillion. The question we ask is such magnitude of areas of corruption. Surely the system should have been strong enough to have been able to identify this and brought action that were necessary. The question I'm saying here is that our process of fighting corruption must be a process. It must be consistent. It must be guided by principles and processes. For example, if you look at our revenue line, agencies that account for over 90% of our revenues, either in the oil revenue sector, in the tax and inland revenue sector, or customs. But you'll be surprised that some of these sectors today, you hardly find levels of cases of anti-corruption catching the front pages. But you see areas of revenue of less than 2% being the areas of discourse. The argument I'm saying is that unless those processes are transparent enough, we will begin to have challenges and begin to put doubt in some of the processes. It is my view that we must put in ways to ensure that our institutions are strong, our institutions are transparent, our institutions have the capacity to show neutrality, efficiency, and fairness in the process. This is important and in ensure that with these lack of discretion, predictability, confidence in the system will go a long way in helping our fight against corruption. At this point, we must also add to say perception also is important. We must ensure that it is perceived to be transparent. It is perceived that it is not politically motivated, because any process that is not supported in a way that is transparent has its own deterrent effects on the process itself. On the part of the National Assembly, it is my view that we can do a lot in ensuring that we have laws that strengthen the process. Already we have started with some of the laws on the area of the whistleblower bill that should have been passed in the 7th Senate, but is coming back hopefully in the 8th Senate. We have certain laws. I hope that this conference will sit back, review, and be able to tell us some of these areas that you need our contribution. The step that we're taking today in the collaboration, it's a good step. The executive alone cannot, and not in any way possible, to fight corruption alone. The National Assembly, by this act, is making its message right and clear that we want to stand, and we will stand beside the executive in ensuring that we fight corruption. Ladies and gentlemen, the fight against corruption cannot and will not also be won on the basis of just prosecution of offenders. My view, there is one area that needs a lot of work, and that is the area of prevention. And I will start by looking at our processes, the way our financial institutions operate, the way our financial institutions know their clients, the way we operate the areas of land registry, all the areas where proceeds for corruption can be hidden. It is my view that stringent procedures that are ready to apply, tough fines to defaulting parties, will play a great role to prevent corruption. We must appreciate that any society that creates a fairly easy process to hide away ill-gotten proceeds will have systemic prevalent corruption. So on our part in Parliament, it is my hope at the end of this deliberation, you will guide us to review laws in areas of fines and penalties to errant organizations and individuals. We can learn from countries like the United States, where fines that have been meted out to large corporations over the last number of years have turned and reduced the cases of corruption, and has been a great deterrent to the flouting of law and in turn. This is an area I believe will go a long way in ensuring that we reduce the cases of corruption. It is also my view that as we play our part in the legislature, other arms of government must be determined to do the same. It is my view that the judiciary on its part must take steps to modernize itself, create an environment and ensure a speedy and quality of justice. They must be able to give what is necessary to support the executive and the legislative arm. At the National Assembly, we have done our best recently in passing a bill increasing the number of judges of the Federal High Court and appeal courts to reduce the workload, and we think this will go a long way in ensuring the efficiency of some of the judiciary processes. Finally, I will not end my remarks without commenting on the need for every authority under our Constitution to abide by decisions of the court made within jurisdiction. This is the only way to preserve law and order, maintain the rule of law, and an essential ingredient for the survival of our nascent democracy. As emphasized earlier, anti-corruption does not start or end with ICPC, EFCC, police, or even at days the state of DSS. The fight is all encompassing. This fight can only be fought and won by all of us, the people and the government, working in sync and providing our own part in the processes. In closing, I must re-emphasize the need for us to fight corruption by a process itself which is not corrupt. We must obey the rule of law. We must change our cultural way. I must again emphasize on my view on the issue of our cultural way. A society that does not question the source of income or wealth of some of our people, a society where people overnight are now surrounded by wealth and we continue to give them praises, accolades, and recognition. I think we have a role also as society to change that, because in fighting this corruption, it is not only the structures, but also the attitude of the people of our great country. Distinguished participants, as I've been here before for discussions on the capital market, and one of my remarks is that these conferences are only as good as the conclusions that you come up with. While you spend the next couple of days to deliberate, I hope that at the end of the exercise, we're able to deliberate on what is necessary. One, in collaborating between the legislative and executive arm, what laws are necessary to ensure that we have the regular deterrent in the areas of corruption. And finally, and most important, is also the process. The process must be transparent. The process must follow our Constitution, and the process must also respect the independence of the different structures. I hope with these few remarks, it's my pleasure to welcome you for this very important conference. And I urge us to talk and be irrespective of party affiliation, religious leaning, but work together as a country who wants to achieve a corruption-free nation that works for all Nigerians, regardless of their social or political status. On this note, God bless you. God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria.